Hello everyone, welcome back to Summary My Movies again. The year is 2007 and Young retells his class during career day that he wants to be the first person in history that can teleport himself. In fact, his very high IQ is allowing him to build a teleporter in his garage. The teacher scolds him and says he's failed the assignment for not being realistic, so a disappointed Reed goes back to doodling equations in his notebook. When Ben is called next, he can't help being curious about Reed's work. Later in the evening, Ben is trying to escape his brother's terrorizing and comes outside to his family salvage shop where he hears a weird noise. It turns out the reader's looking for a power converter which he needs for his teleportation machine. If Ben let him have the PC, promises to show the invention to him and Ben accepts. Moments later, and Reed's garage band helps Reed finish the machine. They put a toy car on and Reed activates the machine, which causes their surrounding to shake and the power to fail. To their shock, the toy successfully disappears and only leaves a few rocks behind. 7 years later at the school Science fair, Reed and Ben present an upgraded version of the teleportation machine, which can teleport things away but also bring them back. Reed borrows a toy plane from a kid and as a demonstration effectively making the plane disappear and then return covered in sand. This causes a power surge that destroys the glass of the basketball ring. Unfortunately, the teachers think they're doing magic tricks instead of actual science and disqualify them. However, Dr. Storm and his adopted daughters, who are also in the fair, and Reed's machine got their attention. Storm works for the Baxter Foundation, a government-funded research institution. He reveals his team has also sent things to other dimensions, but they haven't managed to bring them back, which means Reed is ahead of them. Reed is surprised to hear this because he had thought has been sending things to other spots on Earth, no other dimensions. So Sue shows him a test tube containing sand matching what's on the plane. The institution has analyzed the sand, but it doesn't match any particles on Earth. At that moment, Storm offers Reed a full scholarship at the Baxter Foundation. The next day, Ben helps Reed move into the foundation and gives readers utility Swiss knife as a present, saying this is where Red truly belongs. Later, Reed takes a look around the building to get to know everything, being very impressed by the amazing labs and the huge library. When he bumps into Sue, he tries to start a conversation, but Reed doesn't know how to talk to girls and everything goes rather awkwardly. Meanwhile, Storm is having a meeting with the board about the expedition to a supposed new world. He explains that if they access this other dimension, they can use its resources and maybe even find a way to save their own planet. But after reading the reports, government scientist Dr. Allen notices the named Victor Von Doom and doesn't trust it because the last time Victor works them, he burned all of Storm's data servers before leaving him. Allen's willing to give him a second chance because Victor has a lot of potential and was the one that created their version of the machine, but Storm must promise to supervise them closely. After the meeting, Storm goes to see Victor and tries to recruit him back. At first, Victor declines, but he changes his mind when he hears Reed managed to bring things back and that Sue will be part of the team. Back in the labs, Reed and Sue are working with a team of scientists to make a bigger version of Reed's machine. Sue discovers that Reed's model was ripping a hole in the fabric of space and time, which can cause a black hole and could swallow the entire planet, so they need to be careful. Some time later, Storm and Victor arrive. After introductions are made, Sue and Victor show Reed and in which they took from the other world during their last try. Storm explains that this new planet could be used to save their own, but Victor doesn't think that Earth deserves to be saved, and Sue jokingly calls him Dr. Doom for being a pessimist. Meanwhile, Storm's troublesome son Johnny is competing in an illegal car race. He's actually doing extremely well since Speed is his best friend, but when he's about to win, the engine of his car floods and he crashes into an electric post. Later, Storm picks him up from the hospital, disappointed to see Johnny racing again. They argue about Johnny wasting his potential because Storm thinks Johnny is destined for greater things, so he tells his son that he won't get his car back unless he works for him. Left with no other choice, Johnny joins the team at the foundation. Weeks pass with everyone working hard together or forming a very strong friendship among themselves, although Victor begins to get jealous when he notices Reed and Sue are getting closer. After lots of exhausting days, the team finally finishes building the teleportation machine and they call it the Quantum Gate. Reed sends a picture of it to Ben, thanking him for everything that he has done for him. The next day, Allen and the board arrive to watch a live demonstration. They sent Monkey for the first organic test, and after a few seconds of tension they get a video feed what the other dimension, which they call Planet Zero. Then the monkey returns in good health, which officially makes the experiment effective and safe. Alan congratulates the team, but when the teenagers say they want to go next, Alan immediately refuses. Creators must stay behind to control the machine they'll be sending NASA men instead at. After the board leaves, Reed, Johnny, and Victor decided to have a drink together to forget their disappointment. However, they keep complaining about the fact they don't get to go to the dimension they discover themselves, which should give them first step rights. Reed comes forward and convinces everyone they should use the machine on their own and go behind everyone's backs. The other two agree and recalls Ben to join them since he wasn't original creator too. Moments later, everyone suits up and gets into the machine pods. Meanwhile, Sue is working in the office and gets an alert that someone is activating the gate, so she runs to the lab to check. By the time she arrives, the 4 men have already disappeared. On Planet Zero, the guys are amazed by this new dimension. When Rate and Ben put up the American flag, the ground breaks and reveals a glowing green light beneath it. Afterward, they check on the place where Victor thinks the energy is converging. Johnny stays at the top of the cliff to be the anchor as the other 3 climb down and find a green lava-like substance. When he touches it, Victor discovers that is responding to a physical stimulus. Then Victor dips his hand further, only for the substance to explode, causing the ground to erupt. The 3 men run back to the rope and climb immediately, with Johnny supporting their weights, but Victor falls hanging on the rope. Reed tries to pull them up, but the erupting green substance reaches Victor and spreads over his body, so Reed has no choice but to let go of him. Unfortunately, the substance melts off the rope, causing Victor to fall back down to the surface. Reed and Ben continue climbing and reunite with Johnny to go back inside their pots. However, the re-entry is not working. At that moment, Sue gets there, signals back and activates the return, but she isn't fast enough. Suddenly, Johnny catches on fire, and Ben has hit by a bunch of rocks. The machine explodes when it returns and sends a shockwave that knocks Sue out and causes blackouts to the whole city. When Reed regains consciousness, he immediately sees Johnny burning and Ben caught onto the rocks. His own legs are caught under a pillar, but Reed begins crawling anyway, thinking he can get out. However, when he looks back, he sees his legs unusually stretching and he passes out. The next day at Area 57, the scientists are doing experiments on Reed to test his stretching abilities. Whenever he wakes up, he gets too emotional, and the scientists put him to sleep again. Storm comes to see his children and discovers Sue shifting in and out of the visible spectrum. Johnny is still burning, and when he wakes up, he panics and releases an explosion, making Storm feel pity for him. Sometime later, Reed wakes up again and hears Ben calling for help. He immediately decreases his arms to escape the bindings and crawls through the vent until he finds the room Ben is at. To Reed's shock, he sees Ben has turned into a human rock. At that moment, the whole facility has alerted of his escape, so after promising Ben that he will figure out a solution, Reed escapes the facility alone, easily using his powers to stop any guard that gets in his way. Afterward, Alan visits Banner, manipulates him into thinking that Reed has abandoned them. He says that the government and Area 57 can find a way to fix what happened to them, but in return the teams will need help with their service. A year later, Ben, Johnny, and Sue are controlling their abilities perfectly and have become great assets for the government, especially Ben, who was sent to war zones to destroy enemy tanks. Johnny can now fly and Sue can turn other objects invisible too. She also can create a force field. Alan discusses this with the Pentagon, proposes another quantum gate project aiming to give the United States military powers to. At Area 57, Johnny and Sue argue about what they should do with their abilities. Johnny wants to use his powers for something useful, like going on missions like Ben, but Sue doesn't want to be treated as a tool and thinks they should wait to be sure they can be fixed as promised. Some time later, Alan arrives with agents from the Pentagon and shows them the quantum gate. The generals agree to give their support to the project, but only in exchange for using Ben and Johnny more on the field. Storm hears this and doesn't like the idea of the government using any of his children as weapons, so he talks to Sue and tells her they need to find Reed quickly since he's the only one that can make the gate work and get a cure. Sue immediately begins Reed's moves on the internet to find a pattern. She discovers that he has been collecting scrap metals and always keeping himself updated about Ben. Now she has to patiently wait for his next move. Meanwhile, Reed keeps on buying metal scraps while using his power to change his face every time so security cameras won't recognize him. He's been collecting parts to build a new gate, but the next time he logs in on his computer, Sue manages to track him down. Using Sue's intel, Area 57 sends a team to capture Reed, but they accidentally trigger a security system. Reed quickly runs to the woods and gets surrounded by soldiers, but he's been training his abilities to and easily fights them all. When the soldiers fail to catch them, they released Ben to finish the job. Ree tries to explain he still cares and has been looking for a cure, but Ben is hurt and shuts him up with a headbutt. On the true IP back, Reed apologizes for leaving everyone and promises to find a cure. However, Ben knows that Alan won't let anyone fix them because they're useful like this. When they arrive in Area 57, Sue talks to Reed and convinces him to help them fix the gate, telling him that this is the chance for his work to make a difference. He finally agrees to help and immediately begins working on Quantum Gate 2 with more effort than last time. When it's time for a new teleportation trial, Reed and Johnny reunite. And unlike Ben, Johnny is happy to see his old friend again. Next, the machine safely sends a new crew to Planet Zero, which has changed a lot during the past year. Suddenly they're shocked to see a human shape approaching. It turns out to be Victor, who somehow has managed to survive all this time here. Alan orders the crew to bring Victor back and he's immediately sent to an examination room. When they look at him more closely, they discover that his suit is fused with his body and the green light can be seen underneath. Alan promises Victor that he'll cure him in exchange for him telling them everything he knows about Planet Zero. Victor explains that it was the place itself that kept him alive and gave him immense power. Then he snaps and uses his newfound telepathy to kill everyone in the room. Afterward, Victor goes out and wanders around the building to kill every single person he can find without remorse. An alarm quickly goes off, and for a moment Ben thinks Reed is the one trying to run away again. Johnny is on his guard and accidentally hits an invisible Sue. Then the siblings go looking for their father. At that moment, Victor is trying to go back to Planet Zero and Storm is trying to stop him. By the time the siblings arrive, they have to watch our Victor mercilessly kill Storm. Then Reed and Ben also arrive and try to talk Victor down, but Victor simply telepathically shoves them away before finally entering the machine and Rich. At Zero, there he starts overloading the quantum gate to create a vortex that will pull everything from Earth to the other world. A furious Johnny flies to the portal to Planet Zero and Sue creates a force field around herself and her two friends to follow him. Seeing how the vortex works reduces that the matter from Earth is being converted into energy. And the only way to shut it down is to stop the source itself, which is Vicky. After Johnny and Ben attack separately with all their might, but Victor can easily beat them down by barely lifting a finger. He covers Johnny with smaller rocks and mud to kill off his fire and attaches bigger rocks to Ben, making it impossible for him to move. Meanwhile, Sue creates a massive force field that prevents the debris from Earth from falling into the quantum gate. Noticing this, Victor sands sand and small rocks to detect where Sue is hiding. The particles overwhelm her force field, and the extra weight causes her to fall. Then Reed attempts to talk Victor out of it again, but his only answer is to ask Reed to call him Doom as he spreads the green substance over Reed's body in order to make him loose like old rubber. At that moment, Sue recovers and tries to attack Victor directly, but he just pins her down using his powers. Seeing his friends on the brink of death, regathers has strengthened, regains control of his body, which allows them to attack Victor and throw him off a cliff. It only takes a few seconds for Victor to rise again, but this time Ben is waiting for him with a huge rock that he throws as a distraction. Then Sue traps him inside a force field which Johnny fills with his flames to burn him up. Victor uses his powers to break Sue's force field, but Reed comes after him next to fight him hand to hand. This turns out to be another distraction because at that moment Ben comes out of Sue's invisibility and punches Victor into the machine. Lastly, Johnny breaks all the pillars, causing Victor to be turned into pure energy. Now the battle is over and they won. The four friends run back to the machine to return to Earth right before the gate closes. Sometime later, the HTTP Pentagon thanks them for saving the world and asks them to be their soldiers. But the friends turn them down and passive-aggressively imply things will get nasty if they aren't left alone. At least they get gifted a large lab to work on, and they agree they need to come up with a name for their team. After a comment made by Ben, Reed says they shall be the Fantastic Four. Thank you for your watch this video. Please subscribe for get more video.